session to order. Thank you for being patient during the delays as we've gotten a little bit of the technology refresh. And I think that's important to do periodically. So the first item on our work session agenda today is looking at the bell schedule recommendations. Mr. Neal.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Martin. I'm not going to encourage anyone to try to read what's on the screen, but rather let everyone know that this is online. It's in the Assembly application where you can hit that little plus sign in the lower right corner and make it bigger. We're not going to walk through this entire chart. What I would like to do is just go through the few new schools that are opening and the recommended L schedules for those, and then the few schools where we're proposing a change and what that change is and what the basis for it is. So I'm going to start with the new schools, and you can find those that are highlighted in kind of a bluish color. So the first one you'll see is Alston Ridge Middle, a new middle school, and we're proposing that open on the second tier, which is 8:15, and run till 3. And then if you come over to the middle column,
there's a spinner.
Green Level High, new high school, we're proposing opening on first tier. Those tiers for high school, first, middle, second are what we call our standards for those levels of schools, our current standards. At the bottom of the middle column is Parkside Elementary, and that is proposed for third tier. Again, that's the standard for elementary, 9:15 to 3:45. And then the final one being proposed is Southeast Raleigh Elementary, and again, that's being proposed at this time at the standard third tier. The changes, I believe there are 4 proposed changes. Again, they're all on the left-hand column. The first one is Apex High. We had shifted them back for the current year while they were in swing space by a few minutes. We're recommending putting them back on the standard first-tier schedule of 7:25 to 2:18. Now that they're going to be back in the coming year in their permanent location. The next two let me cover as a pair, if you will, Briarcliff Elementary and Cary Elementary. They're both currently second tier. We are recommending that they go to third tier. Primary driving force with the opening of the new high school, we are trying to mitigate the impact of adding additional bus drivers next year. You'll still see in the proposed budget when it's brought to the board in a few weeks, there will be funding requests for additional bus drivers. I think it's going to be in the 50-ish range to accommodate new schools, some new services that are being provided. For example, that neighborhood service in the western part of Wake County, neighborhood bus service for Southeast Raleigh, those sorts of things. But by moving these two from their current second tier to the elementary standard of third tier, it allows us to free up buses to mitigate the number of total drivers that we would add. And then the last change is East Cary going from first to second tier. And when I say the last change, I guess technically there is one more change, but again, it's a minor, it's a few minutes. For Fuquay High, when they're in temporary space, starting them a few minutes earlier, taking them from 7:25 to 7:10.
What did they say?
They're moving 15 minutes earlier. Of course, we've already started to hear
They're
about
at a swing space.
So we're
The same thing we did to Greenland with Apex and Greenland.
Which is why Apex is back to
going back to their
7:20.
regular.
A question.
So that is it for the new schools and the current schools that have a change proposed.
Could you explain why Briarcliff and Cary Elementary are the ones being affected as opposed to elementary schools that are closer to green level?
Yeah, so when we look at the overall coordination of buses, we looked at, for instance, Davis Drive Elementary School is right in that area. And when you look at their coordination, we're actually using Green Hope High School buses as a shared run to Davis Drive Elementary. So you know that Green Hope High School is a first-tier school. We'll take students to Green Hope High School, and then we use the same bus to get Davis Drive Elementary School students a first tier because they're a little bit later first tier. Our bus coordinations are full. We're doing everything that we can do to mitigate having to add bus routes because we simply don't have the bus drivers. So as we go through this process every year of looking at proposed bell schedule changes, we look at where we can gain. We don't want to just change the schedule to change the schedule. And with the example I gave you of Davis Drive Elementary School, we don't gain anything because we're using other first-tier buses to accommodate them on first tier. In fact, when we move Davis Drive Elementary off of first tier to third tier, the way that area coordination is set up, it's likely we would actually have to add buses. So it's very complicated. I don't know how in-depth you want me to get, but in looking at Briarcliff and Cary Elementary School, moving them to third tier, we now free up room to move East Cary Middle School to second tier. East Cary Middle School, we use 10 buses to service them. We think we can gain that and put and shift so that we can reduce the number of buses we need at Green Level High School by 10 buses by, for example, moving West Cary Middle School bus routes, and West Cary Middle School is a first-tier school, to that back to the Cary District, Transportation District, because we've opened up first tiers by moving East Cary Middle School off of first tier. And so now Green Hope High School, neighboring Green Level High School, can now service Green Level High School and reduce the number of new buses we need with electric buses. And it is a lot more complex than that, but those are some examples of what we're looking at as we go through the process.
Well, they're ready for that. They know how I feel about Northridge Elementary. And David, you and I talked about it because we told them last year, and you want me to produce a transcript about that, but it's coming. We told them that if they would go to third tier for their time they were at East Millbrook Temporary Campus, that we would let them go back to their second tier when they came back to Northridge Elementary. We talked about it many times, and I've been emailing all year off and on to Mr. Nieder. Don't forget, we told Northridge we wouldn't keep them there because the reason was, he said, because we had to take the bus farther out, so we needed to do that. So we kind of gave our word, or at least I gave mine based on what I heard, that we would bring them back. So that's a complication for me. But I think even more so, and I know there's a million reasons why we say this, but I do not like to see us adding more elementary schools to third tier. I understand we're in a predicament, but I think we should see how much we could get out of that. I think having any elementary schools on third tier, let alone adding some more this year, is problematic.
Any response to that?
We're listening. Okay. We're here to listen.
Segueing from that, just as I've said every bell schedule before, I'd love for us to look into seeing what we can do to flip that high school start time and what that would take. I sent an inquiry just now about Apex Elementary because their bell schedule was shifted when Apex High went to the Green Level campus temporarily, and I noticed they're not moving back to their 8:30 start time, and I just was curious as to why and what factors went into making that decision.
Situation.
Was that similar just to balance out the loads between the three tiers? You know, similar to Northridge and what Ms. Cash was just speaking to, just trying to balance out the three tiers, not speaking to an individual school committee, but rather speaking to the structure of a three-tier system or a multi-tier system. You're taking, you know, the multi-tier system, for all intents and purposes, is taking a limited resource and using it multiple times.
I understand that.
And so if it's going to be used to its best extent, you have to smooth out the multiple times and have them somewhat evenly loaded.
Right. Yeah, and I was asking, I don't need an answer at the table, but I was asking specifically what went into that, and I realize that's central to here, but I know that that's going to be a question that I hear from families.
We'll get you some information.
Thank you.
We can't return to the larger conversation. We haven't talked about it in a while.
No.
Talked about it a few years
And it
ago.
is feedback we get from often from parents of adolescents who are trying to get their adolescents' sleep schedules to align with our early high school start.
It's always my letters from students too.
Right. And when the students write to us. But I think we could have some data from when Broughton and Sanderson, when I first came on the board, started at 8 o'clock. And then they moved to 7:20 soon after I got on the board. It was not my idea, but I think could we compare some data on attendance for that first period? That's one thing I hear from parents a lot, that their students are often tardy or miss first period. Hear that from schools sometimes. So if we could look at that comparison of 8 when I think Knightdale recently was also at 8 o'clock. If we could look at those three schools and their attendance data at some point.
Mr. Fletcher?
Well, Durham County has moved some schools. I don't know what success they've
Guilford.
had.
Guilford split them too.
For the folks who wrote me about the Cary Briarcliff delayed opening of their schools, I included a question, would you prefer 7:40? And one of those emails, it got misinterpreted as being a survey. I guess it was a survey of one, but and I've tried to clarify that. It was interesting. At least 2/3 of the parents wrote back and said, "Yes, I would prefer that to 8:15. It would be better
9:15
to 9:15." So it was just an interesting anecdote. I wouldn't call it more than that at the moment. David, can you speak to this? West Cary has a 7:30 start time. West Cary Middle.
Currently.
It is the currently. It is the calendar alternate for Austin Ridge Middle. It is the overflow school for Mills Park Middle. And perhaps another, I'm not sure, but both of those have an 8:15 start time. So that cause any pause in terms of having the overflow school and the calendar option school starting on first tier when those schools are on second tier?
That is difficult for a lot of families, especially because some of them that are in the overflow are near US 64, so their kids are having to get on the bus quite early.
Yeah, that question can be interpreted and thus answered in a few different manners. Let me interpret it technically perhaps first and not the impact on a family, but technically there is no impact from an operational transportation operations perspective. It's separate buses. Correct. I'm looking at Mr. Snidemiller serving them. So there's no operational impact on that disconnect. It's not really a disconnect per se.
Yeah, and West Cary Middle School works better on first tier for us right now because of the draw area. It's got a large draw area, and the larger the draw area, we tend to put those schools on first tier. We have to start those buses early. If you started on a second tier, you have to start those long runs so early that you now took away the first tier capability of that same bus.
So just to check language, we're talking about the base assignment area being large, not a draw area.
Yes, the basis.
Okay, it's not a magnet.
With the capping of Mills Park and going over into that area to get to West Cary.
Okay, but that's my question, is the Mills Park and Austin Ridge geographic areas are expanding West Cary beyond what West Cary is.
Yes,
that's correct. Yes.
And
So it's creating an earlier start for the
transportation.
for the more distant kids.
Yes, it is. And so that we get semantics perhaps clarified. When Bob said draw area, it's not the students that are riding buses, yellow buses, to get to East Cary
East West Cary.
East West Cary Middle School, whether they're base student assignment, overflow, option, it's all those that are using the services are what you would call in the quote-unquote draw area, ridership area, which is far beyond the base assignment area.
Okay. Well, a couple of things. One, this is another reason why capping is not a good idea. Although it is a tool that we've had to use. And secondly, this whole conversation shines a blinding light on inadequate resources to transport 80,000 children safely twice a day. I mean, it's a customer service issue. And every time we don't do that, and what I'm hearing from some parents is a significant economic hardship to make the 45-minute change, which changes their, which adds daycare cost in the morning that they currently don't have because of their work schedules.
Yes.
But
It's a long day, too, for an elementary.
it's just, I mean, it's the inadequate resources to source enough buses.
Drivers.
We have buses.
Well, and drivers. Okay, so I mean, it's we have more equipment than we have drivers, so it's really a driver issue, and the inadequate resources to recruit, retain, and properly compensate enough drivers to provide services to all of our kids is the problem. And what that results in is carpools that back up onto public streets and create traffic hazards.
Yep.
So it's a vicious circle. And our schools were designed expecting a carpool line to be X miles long. It's now up to 3/4 of a mile required on campus for carpooling. Think about that, 3/4 of a mile of roadway on campus for carpooling. That's a requirement from DOT.
For new construction.
For new construction. Now, obviously, we've got a lot of schools where that's not possible because they're there. And so the end result of that increased interest in carpooling or necessity of carpooling is backing up and creating challenges on municipal streets. So this is a catch-22, and I don't much like being in it, but I'm in it with some very nice people. Again, I share the concern for Cary and Briarcliff in particular because of the small school communities, reasonably small footprint of the assignment patterns. So I don't know what other alternatives we would have. It would be nice to see an option. I don't have the technology or the ability to take 750 pieces of equipment and put them in different places to achieve the outcome that you folks do every day. So I've got to depend on what you tell us is the best solution. But that doesn't mean the solution is a whole lot of that have to stand up and cheer about it.
Understood.
I think these comments are all pointing to, right, this is the challenge of this exact decision we have to make. In many respects, it's a management challenge, and we're a governing board. We need to set the principles, but we can't go through and say, well, but you could change this by this much.
Right. That would be disastrous.
That would be disastrous. That's right. So, and we respect the work, the recommendations that you've made. I mean, the bell schedule is. What, this is fine? We respect the recommendations that have been made. Is that what I said?
No, I don't respect one, but I mean.
Okay. We don't necessarily agree with them.
Maybe three.
I will say we respect the work that has led to the recommendations.
Yeah,
okay. But I think there are continuing questions about the bell schedules. I mean, clearly, the high schools, because they have the largest draw area, is part of the reason they have to start early, as you noted, because if you have a big draw area that starts later, you still have that much time and you lose a tier. As Mr. Fletcher noted, this is a resource issue, but we are doing some shifting of resources from the public sphere to families dealing with daycare. I do wonder, and this bell schedule isn't the time to resolve all of that, but maybe we need to bring this again to facilities meeting or something to talk about strategies, what might we do. But I wonder about, could we learn something about overall traffic patterns? Do we have buses, for example, that are taking the same route, maybe to go to a high school and to a middle school or elementary school? What's the difference in time that it takes to do that same route depending on different times of the day? Does that influence, for example, to what extent we could flip schedules? Might it be appropriate to look at what fraction of our third-tier schools offer a before-school care? Could that become a standard that it needs to be, that if we have a third-tier bus schedule, we will find a way, whether we offer it or whether it's in partnership with the Y or something. I guess my point is, can we establish some principles to try to address some of these challenges until we have funding? Ideally, we'd like to put everybody on about an 8 to 8:30 schedule. That would be wonderful. And I think if we could do that, it would be a unanimous vote around this table to make that happen. I haven't seen a way to make it possible, so we're going to have to figure out what do we do in spite of that. So some of these data pieces, and/or are there some things that say, here are our guidelines. If it's going to be a 9:15 start, there has to be an ability to drop a child off by X time because of work schedules, et cetera. So I'm thinking that maybe we need to recommend something like that comes to facilities so we have a little bit more of a thoughtful discussion about where we are and what we can do. Ms. Mahaffey and Mr. Fletcher.
Well, I will say, the two things that I heard when we moved one of my schools from second to third tier was childcare, not only in time but expense. And a lot of parents will say, well, my kid's up at 6. Take them earlier. Now, my sample size is that works for about 2/3 of the children. But, and I know not every kid gets up early, but more do at the elementary level than at the high school level. And there's research to back up why.
And as parents, we get it done. We know that's true.
Yes. Trying to wake up a middle schooler or a high schooler daily.
So we just need 2,000 student elementary schools and 800 student high schools.
Sure. Let's do that.
Mr. Fletcher?
Another concern that's been raised that perhaps we can provide some relief to are those folks who would have made a choice to go to one of our choice schools had they known the bell schedule was going to change. Mm-hmm. And this information is posted after those windows have closed, mm-hmm. so that they're now into the so-called hardship period.
Year before.
So maybe we can have administratively we can encourage our staff. This takes board action. This isn't me to look at folks who are making a request for a school where there's a seat, can't throw somebody out, let somebody else in, and make the second chance magnet application available, let it know that it's be available to folks who've got a hardship due to the changing in bell schedule.
I'd support that.
So, but it's something that staff could do, provided that it's properly socialized.
Yes, just to clarify, the hardship transfer, which a calendar type issue is generally a hardship transfer, that period is not opened yet, or it's not done yet. So if staff has direction from the board around this type of a situation, should a hardship be presented within either second chance magnets or other schools that have space, be something that the staff considers, that would be what fill-in would need.
Just wanted to raise Southeast Raleigh Elementary because of the partnership with the Y. They are requesting or would like to see a little bit earlier start time, perhaps on second tier as opposed to third tier.
Everybody in third tier would like to be second.
Yeah. I mean, for some of us, you're going to still find some of the same reasons Mr. Fletcher just talked about. Childcare. 9 o'clock is pretty late for working parents.
So Southeast Raleigh Elementary, because of the unique partnership with the Y, would like to see a little earlier start time. I think there'll be some bumping with the terms of dropping off kids at Y and all that piece. So a second tier start,
Okay.
I think would be more.
Online.
Yeah.
We will look into that and what it would take to do that.
And then I just
Ms. Cash said look at Northridge too.
And then I'm still curious because I know this had impacted some schools in Wake Forest with the shared rides or the double backs. As we're just looking at the impact, that's not ideal, especially if a driver is sick, if a driver's out, and then you have students so late to school. And I know you're aware of that, but I'm just wondering if that information can be tracked as well when we're thinking about this, because that's creating, some children are having to get to school so early at the high school because they're being picked up because their bus has to do an additional route at that school. And I acknowledge that Mr. Fletcher's already brought up the resource problem, but I just hope that we can still realize it as a problem so we can try to keep looking for solutions.
We are well aware.
I know.
And I think, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Snidemiller and Mr. Sy, for those of you who don't know, Jeff Sy is our director who does all the routing. That's been his background. He came from the ITRI Institute over at NC State, where he had expertise. We were fortunate enough several years ago to lure him away. But I believe one of Bob's stated goals is when we can build a bus driver staff back up to the point where it needs to be, his first goal is to remove those shared runs in the morning and in the afternoon that I believe you're referring to.
That's great to hear. I appreciate that.
So, and I do think, just to, as a point of clarification, I think Transportation does communicate with and work with principals on drop-off times for the first run of the bus. All of our high schools, middle schools are open 30 minutes prior to the start of the school day for any student. And that's around the time that buses are supposed to start dropping off. For these shared runs, it's 5 or 10 minutes earlier. 15 minutes earlier? Okay, 15 minutes earlier. So it shouldn't be earlier than that. We know it's earlier still, but I guess on the bright side, they can get breakfast.
That's a good point, because on my negative side is our elementary school kids, which are the complaints in my district, especially my ESM schools.
That are late? Are
They're
later?
very late.
They're later.
And these are my kids who are already having challenges, and they're missing class. And
If anything goes wrong with the shared run, then it does have and that's true for any.
That's a huge complaint I get from mine.
Yes.
And for the afternoon, it's especially at our elementary schools, it's the need for personnel to be available to supervise students that are waiting for their bus. And so losing time with like maybe an afternoon staff meeting or availability for parent meetings, I mean, that gets...
Their own children.
Right.
No, we fully appreciate, and we share with school administration, that it does place additional work on the school at the beginning of the day and at the end of the day to address those shared loans.
So just, we'll go back to Northridge, for the squeaky wheel here about that. They called me today, the PTA did, and because nothing has changed in my district from when we told them that they needed a later start time to go over to the temporary campus for the 1 year, now they're going back to where they were. They said, what is making it different in our area now than it was 2 years ago? And we didn't get any new buses or changes in new schools. So what is my answer?
Did you hear that?
I can give a shot.
Yeah.
There were two things changed last year, and they were related to the magnet program enhancement. The West Millbrook Middle School became a magnet school, so their attendance school area become larger, require higher demand. Also, Millbrook Elementary School, the neighborhood transportation for magnet also increased. That also increased the demand. So when Northridge shifted to third tier, the empty slot was absorbed by those who increased because of magnet program.
So it was mainly the West Millbrook? I don't quite understand the Millbrook Elementary piece. I have to understand, explain it.
The neighborhood service for magnet program was larger this year than prior years.
So you increased neighborhood trans to Millbrook Elementary as part of incentivizing students to apply.
Okay.
Can I share an anecdote? And if I have previously shared this, I apologize, but I met Jeff Sy many, many years ago when he was still at NC State. And we were building Olive Chapel Elementary School. And he called me to talk about our transportation pattern, particularly on campus. And he has been applying a solutions vision to our transportation problems ever since I first met him. Now, at that time he called me, we basically had a concrete slab, and we're in April, and we're opening a school in August. And there were challenges there, but Jeff's got a mind that can handle about 6 layers or maybe more of a multi-layered chessboard, and that's what he's dealing with. And I know he's got technology to support him. It's difficult to have his talent constrained by what we're having to deal with.
So to try to bring closure to this discussion, I think most people have been able to share their perspectives. We have to get this approved by the 1st of April. Is my memory correct? So that means we would need to have our bell schedules approved at our next meeting. What I have heard as some comeback, I mean, some of the work is bigger long-term work. We're not going to get that done before we approve bell schedules. But I don't know that there's more that can be done or not, but I think I've heard that the Northridge issue needs to come back with some resolution, with some documentation about what was written, at least, to try to understand promises made or not. I think I heard the same question about Apex, and I've heard the question about the Southeast Raleigh YMCA school. Those are the 3 particular issues that I think we're saying we need staff to come back on. Ms. Mahaffey?
Was West Cary part of that as well? Or was that?
I'm not saying yes or no. I'm just trying to capture what did I hear that we're asking.
We'll add Briarcliff and Cary.
I mean, Briarcliff and Cary are issues of concern. Are we asking for something else to be done, or are we recognizing that may need
re-examined?
Are we asking for all of them to be re-examined? I guess is that what we're directing staff? What are we directing staff to do?
re-examine the ones that you mentioned, the schools you mentioned?
Who brought up Briarcliff and West County? Bill?
Briarcliff and Cary are said to be shifted because of Green Level High School opening. West Cary is the draw area issue.
And those are, older schools, that I think having an 8:30 bell schedule helps them stay higher demand schools.
Okay, that's an important consideration. So I guess I'm hearing, what are we instructing staff to do? Come back with
resolution.
Re-examine those.
Re-examine all of those bell schedules?
So when we say all, am I hearing correctly that the board is directing staff to take Briarcliff Elementary, Cary Elementary, East Cary Middle?
West Cary.
West.
I'm sorry.
West Cary.
West Cary Middle and Southeast Raleigh and Northridge and APEC Elementary and reevaluate their bell schedule. Is that what I'm hearing? And so basically for the ones that we are recommending changing, the request would be to leave them as is?
I think that's what I've heard. I mean, I think the request that I'm hearing is to try to keep as many elementary schools as we can on second tier, which potentially is another one of those big bucket questions. Should we, and to Ms. Kushner's point, should we strategically think about where we have second tier elementary schools? Do we need to use that as one of our incentives to some of our older schools? So this gets back to our strategic thinking as opposed to, are we just doing it here because it happens to be on the docket today?
Thank you.
We will look at that. I will share, again, with such a complex, as I think the board recognizes and has shared, a complex choreography, if you will, of almost 190 schools service. The recommendations you heard today, or the proposals you heard today, were based upon things changing, i.e. new schools being added, a school being relocated temporarily, albeit to a different location, but things changing. To not make changes to accommodate the change will likely do one of two things. Have us come back with alternative changes for other schools, or, and it could be a combination, or impact service by making schedules we know we probably can't live up to on a consistent basis.
No, let's not do that.
And I would not want to go there.
No, I think we don't.
But I will say the alternative, because it's kind of a zero-sum game. I wish I had a magic wand. It's kind of a zero-sum game. But when you have a zero-sum and you're making a change over here, something else in that sum is going to change. And I don't know how else to.
So I think what I'm hearing from the board is a request for a little bit more information than here's the list and the statement that this is the best that we can do. Not that I think anybody's trying to distrust or second guess, but I think what I'm hearing is there would be value in saying, if this, then this, if this, then this. And then are going to have to make a decision as to which of those pain points is chosen, because I don't think there is a non-pain point. And I think the board's vote is going to have to be which pain points do we vote for and which do we not.
I would like to clarify that a little bit, though. I mean, I'd like to have you look a little deeper than that, because I wouldn't want you to come back to, because I have a feeling what might come back is that you choose between these two schools in your district going to Tier 3, And that to me is just kind of like a game that we have to play. I want them to look a little deeper than that. I mean, I don't think any of us want to start choosing in our own schools, even though you're saying that might be the only way to do it. If you say that's the only way, I agree, but I do want them to look deeper, because then we're just in a no-win situation. I don't know, the board doesn't really want to be in that, but...
We will obviously look at this. Again, we're not doing this off the top of our head or on the backs of envelopes. We've got technology that the TIM system and several other tools that assist us with this. I wouldn't begin to think we try to do this without technical assistance in this day and age. That said, I believe, Ms. Cash, a lot of that deep digging takes place for months leading up to where we are today. We will do some additional digging and provide some additional information back to the board at your next work session. We'll bring it back to work session. And Dr. Martin, to your point, I believe board policy does direct the board to have bell schedules adopted by April 1st. I do know that in the past, when there have been times where it's needed to go a couple weeks into April, maybe even the second April meeting that the board has, we can bring policy to the board and ask the board to consider waiving the policy if that's necessary if we go through this process.
All right, I think that's about what we can do today. I've gotten a request that we move the legislative agenda next. Mr. Crowder has another meeting he has to get to, if I understand correctly.
The House convenes at 4:45, and there's a school grade bill that I want to be there for.
So we need to get him there.
Okay. Yes,
so if people do not mind, let's go ahead and move to the legislative agenda and priorities. You've all seen the draft document. At our last work session, we had a lot of discussion on that. The feedback was listened to and to the best degree possible, incorporated in some of the modifications. Like I say, you have all seen this. The floor is open for discussion about it. Our goal would be to converge on language that we want in this document so that we can approve it yet tonight. We have a meeting with the Wake County delegation scheduled for March the 18th, which is before we will have another meeting. So again, it is our hope that we can finalize this. What we mean by finalizing is finalizing what gets in the formal document. But as with anything related to politics, this is a living document and living discussion. And that's a lot of the reason why we framed it in this context in buckets and with priorities so that we have good directional talking points rather than a static list. I think it makes us more responsive. So, Mr. Haggerty.
So, Chairman Martin, I want to thank you for all the work that's gone into the document. And I know it's been an evolving process. And I always hate when we come to a point where we're presenting something finally and someone has, well, there's just one more thing. But I'm going to be that guy, and I'm going to suggest just one.
We talked about it, and I think it's a good idea.
Issue. If you look under staffing and accountability, we talk about some positions that are crucial for support of our students. And one item that we've talked about, and we've seen in some other agendas, but I didn't see listed here, were nurses. And I was hopeful if the rest of the board is willing that we could add nurses there along with school counselors and psychologists and social workers.
See unanimity there.
All right, thank you.
Are there any other comments, revisions? Appreciate all of the responses about joining us for the discussion with the legislative delegation. I think the body's engagement will be perceived well. Mr. Crowder, any reflections, ideas?
No, No, just I think, first of all, thank you, Mr. Chair and the board, for the process and for this guidance. I mean, I think we talked about before how this will be used and how it will sort of help shape and at least provide some guide rails for what could be a wide-ranging legislative session in terms of what's proposed. So I'm grateful for that. So, thank you.
All right. Seeing no further discussion, this will be on our action agenda for this evening. And we'll, once it's approved, we'll get some copies printed out. So both you can send PDFs around, but we'll also have some hard copies, like we've had a few of our other documents, so people can get a good sense of it. And I'm really pleased that we've got our 6 core beliefs, because I think the more we can get a community buy-in to those, and the community help generate them, but the more we can get community buy-in and communication, I think that stands us in good stead.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Drive safe.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Drive safe, and we'll look forward to the update.
And I'll send you a summary.
Thank you.
Just because he doesn't have a lot of time before he needs to go.
Thank you very much.
All right. So we go back to the regular order of the agenda. So we're looking at instructional calendars for a number of our early colleges.
Good afternoon, Board Chair, members of the board. I'm joined this afternoon by Tamani Anderson-Powell, who takes a key role in working with the calendar committee, and we can't thank her enough for that complex work as we try to pull our various instructional calendars together. While we recognize you have copies of the calendars in Assembly, we thought it might be easy, because there's so many calendars to look at one time, to have a hard copy to put them side by side for cross-references as you need them. So we'll hopefully will help with that. We have multiple sets. The first one is for the 2019-20. We presented this in our last work session with you, and there were just a few points of clarification that you were seeking before it going to the full board meeting for your approval. This is the one that we have put on the agenda for tonight for approval, in hopes that we can get communication to our parents earlier than later, because it is 19-20. And so really there were just 2 points of clarity that you were asking us to go back to the schools and talk with prospective principals, and I'm going to let Tamani walk you through that at this time.
Okay. So one question that you had was about the Wake STEM Early College, and that's the first one on top of that packet of calendars. So your question was, why were there 3 teacher work days at the beginning of the year, but several at the end? And so I contacted Dr. Schwenker, and they used those days at the end to do a lot of planning and getting ready for the next year. So for an example, he will use 2 of those 3 teacher work days at the beginning of the year for orientation for 9th grade students. He says he has difficulty getting them coming back any earlier than that. And so they use those couple days to really work with students. So then they use the end of the year for PLTs, for looking at curriculum changes, for doing any planning for the next year, working with NC State. So that's why it looks a little flipped, but that's why those teacher work days look like that.
Schwenkerized.
I think as a board, we will continue to voice support for local control. When principals have a good reason for doing something, I think we want to support that.
He sent me 3 emails with a lot more detail that I shared with you.
No, but that sounds like very sound reasoning, and that's exactly what we want to support.
It's aligned with the program.
Yeah.
The next question you had was for the last school in that packet, which is now Knightdale, Northwake, Vernon Malone, and Wake Early College calendar. And your question was, why was there a teacher work day on February 18th instead of February 17th, which is President's Day? It aligns with Wake Tech's calendar.
Which is what we anticipated, but we wanted to make sure that we were sure before we answered. So it's to align with that calendar.
So there are no changes to these calendars. I just printed them again and brought them back. There are no changes, but the questions are answered for you.
thank you for that information.
So are there not any other points of clarity that you are seeking for that bundle of calendars for the 1920? Again, it is on your board agenda tonight on consent for action so that we can get the word out to our respective communities for those schools.
I just want to make sure everybody's good with it being on consent. Sometimes calendar issues we try to put on action just for publicity, but in each of these, I think they're the smaller special schools that have their direct constituencies, and I think that communication has been. That is true. Yeah, so they're on consent for tonight.
I brought back again, I'm sorry. I brought back again Barwell Road and Fox just because they wouldn't, so you'll have these as reference. They're also on the meeting for tonight to be approved.
Okay. Those are good.
Thank you. Thank you for asking those questions last time. The next set of calendars are for the 2020-21 school year. We bring them at this time so we can start being that far out in advance with regard to the calendars, and they are the traditional, the multi-track year-round, and the modified calendars. And last time in our session, we were able to just propose to you, based on a lot of feedback from the calendar committee, about where the calendars were structured to meet various things. And of course, there are calendar law regulations that we have to abide by as well, like certain holidays recognized by the state that we have to build in, certain reporting periods by the end of the quarter, number of work days, start time, end time for the school year, etc. There were some things that you wanted us to go back and kind of work around with regard to the calendar. One primary driver was that we tried to do a teacher workday per month as we can. And so one of the questions in doing that for the traditional, there was a workday that fell in May. And when you were looking at that, you wanted some consistency or try to see what consistency you could bring among the other calendars, the modified and the multi-track. So we went back and we rearranged to see what that might look like and we can do. So we're bringing it back to kind of show you how it falls out. But we also want to share with you some implications and doing that as well to be fully transparent with regard to implications to the schools and the school years on each of the different calendars. And I'll turn that over to Damani now.
Okay, so you'll see on the top of that packet for the 2021, I was able to put a track-out day, essentially, it's just a day out, on May 13th for students. The implication, though, is that is right during exam week for Southeast Raleigh Magnet High School, because that school, of course, is on this modified calendar, and so their exams are earlier than traditional calendars. So that falls during exam time as they're prepping for graduation. So that's a challenge for that, but I wanted you to see what it would look like. If you flip over, you'll see that I've rearranged the work days. There is purple. I know it's really tiny. It's kind of hard to see. But I was able to rearrange the days and have a work day on May 13th. All of the schools are on the multi-track year-round are elementary and middle, so not as much of an impact for high schools and for testing that high schools have. And then you'll see, so there was no change to the traditional calendars. The change was to the modified and the multi-track year-round to align them with what was already on the traditional calendar. Again, a challenge with a May teacher workday. Similar to Southeast, it's during a testing time. So that's a conversation that you may want to consider.
Exam time, which can present hardship with some schools because the AP exam schedule will stay the same. There will not be a waiver for that. So we would have to find a way to get our students who are enrolled for AP exams to the testing site. That might incur some transportation costs to get the students who need transportation to the testing site for an AP exam, because AP testing dates are set on a national level. We would not be able to change.
Are they set for 21?
They are not set for 2021. So we know the window of time.
Yeah, the pattern's set.
Yeah, we know the windows of time. Usually AP exams fall for schools, so we know that we just don't know what tests will actually be administered that day, whether it's a test with high participation or one of those tests that might be a smaller participation. We just don't know. but it does fall within that window. So we would certainly want to make sure that if it is a work day, it remains as a work day, that we as a district provide transportation for the individuals who might need to access that for a testing site.
And those exams are only given once a year, so whether you take the course first semester or second semester, you need to be there for the exam.
Who administers the test?
Staff will administer the test. They go through training, they have proctors and all that, but administration, staff rather, administers it.
So that would pull staff out of their work day. Our staff?
That is, yes.
I know they need work, but they wouldn't have
There
a
would be,
collaboration.
if you keep it as a work day, that would be a work day for them. We would not be pulling staff from the classroom, but staff would be required. A lot of the times, it could be a combination of counselors and or teachers, depending.
Teachers, would that be a problem? I mean, do the teachers, would they say that's not nice?
It'd be less of a problem from a work day than it would be from a regular classroom.
I think.
I didn't know if collaboration on your.
Well, certainly, it's more one requirement that you place on staff. Probably the hardship that would be the one that would be of most priority that you would have to address transportation.
Looking at the multi-year, year-round calendar, 3 of the 4 work days are bunched between October and Election Day?
They are. So one of those is the district workday, which is now October 23rd. I'm sorry, there was a change because I changed the district workday, I'm so sorry, to October 23rd. So you will see on each calendar, there is a district teacher workday on October 23rd. And then to make the tracks work, Ms. Kushner, I just had to, well, I started with, I know I want to do October 23rd, and I know I want to do May 13th. Now, what else will work so that each track still has 177 students?
On Election Day, I mean, we wanted
right,
election
we wanted on Election Day.
The work day so that, but that's a flexible work day that teachers can take leave to.
Correct.
And they did generally prefer them earlier because they want them to not be subject to weather makeup, so that they actually become teacher work days.
Well, then they have one later, right before.
But the one in May represents sort of this commitment that we've all seen as teachers around trying to have one every month.
Right.
It just May's always an awkward month.
Right. Thank you.
So we would ask if there are any other questions or any other points of clarity you would like for us to address or work out any of these calendar options. Also, some direction from you about what you would like for us to do with regard to the work days and where they fall monthly, but in particular the one in May. Sometimes we are able to do a work day in May, sometimes we're not, given some of the challenges we've just presented to you. So we need, we're seeking guidance from you about knowing challenges that would come in putting that day, or versus trying to put the work days as they're shown right now, because we want you to see how it looks based on your request last time. Scott?
I do want to say thank you for keeping that in mind with the teacher work days. That collaboration is just invaluable to educators, as you know, and I know that teachers appreciate that. I am curious about what feedback, if you've received feedback from both teachers and principals about the potential impacts to their everyday with the work days as listed, or just in general, what kind of feedback you've received from them regarding.
This is for a traditional calendar, and just so teachers love having one a month. I think people are excited about, sadly, excited about no early release and having some actual PD time to work together. I think they are concerned about having one in May. We've not done one in May since a couple of years ago when it became a real struggle. So I think they're in the committee that day. There was a lot of conversation about the instructional needs versus what we want to do for the community. And, that's always a back and forth. And so in that committee, there was a back and forth. But I think teachers definitely appreciate having a teacher work day each month and having some real strong full-day PD time.
I think one additional piece in the large scope of all the teacher workdays was making a commitment to place one every month. Also means you don't put all of them down as weather makeup days. So that provides a little more certainty that some of the workdays remain workdays.
I think that's important to note because we've gotten, with the sporadic weather events we've had in recent years, I think it's making a sound commitment to having objectives.
They feel like they can plan. This year, of course, this year was certainly crazy, but they can plan and kind of be sure that they can work that plan. This year, there were plans for early release that we had to change.
And we should be grateful that today's a dry, not so cold, not as cold as they projected. I just want to lift that up.
Ms. Scott, if I may add to you, in addition to the teachers and principals who are representing the committee and other top teachers at the Superintendent's Advisory Council, given that the modified involves so few schools, Tamani's able to reach out to them specifically, and in this case reached out to the high school that would be most impacted with the exam schedule, just to see if there would, one, be an impact, and it does fall with an exam, and how they might could adjust as they need. But so we did get some impact from them. We just want to be fully transparent with you and all the input we get from the schools and the stakeholders about how we, as we try to accommodate that one teacher workday a month, which we are so committed to as well. At the same time, in doing that, we also don't, on the other hand, do an unintended consequence of hardship that we're not aware of, exam week or AP testing or something.
It sounds like to me that it sounds like you took that information and feedback, and you still have that workday in May, and that's based on.
We wanted you as a board to see what it looked like, but also to give you the feedback about being completely aware of what it looks like, but also some things we would have to work around if it should stay as it's reflected on the calendar now. Or even whatever day really in May, because AP exams fall like a 2-week, sometimes 3-week period of time. And then we've got the modified Southeast in particular, their exam schedule we have to work and how it butts into graduation with them too.
So it'll be interesting to see the impact on the modified calendar. Many universities will, it's not uncommon to have a reading day in the middle of exam block. So there could even be a benefit.
Really good.
There could even be a benefit having the work day in the middle of exam block, because then you've got a little bit of time instead of every 4 months. So
they would just have to rethink about when their exam period starts. It might be a day or so early because they couldn't extend it because it would get into it when the graduation is set. So we probably have to extend their window a little earlier than it might would naturally fall.
Right, but we might want to intentionally work at having exams on both sides of that, because that can actually be done. Ms. Cash.
Quick question about, thank you, first of all, this is amazing work. I don't even begin to try to understand all that. 2021 multi-track calendar. Just one quick question. I think I'm reading it wrong, but I just want to be sure. Is track 2 cut up a lot with work days, or am I looking at it wrong?
So each track, it does look like track 2 is cut up a lot of days with.
Just wondering, because that's not like a favored track anyhow. I didn't know how that. I might get a question about that.
Yes, that's
district-wide in the
October and November.
It does look like track 2 is impacted. So I can take a look at that, but the idea is to be able to have all of the teachers there at the same time, like when we did early release. So it's a transition time. It's when we've tried to put them in. But November 3rd just falls because it's election day.
That kind of impacts. And to your point, Ms. Cash, we'll look at how it impacts that track in particular so it doesn't look so choppy. It's so rare and year-round to teach all your teachers on a work day at the same time.
The goal
so that may offset what the impact of working around some impact on track 2 to be able to have everybody in the building at the same time, which is a real desire on principals and teachers' part.
Well, that'd be a good answer for the parents. Parents might say, what, they're in, they're out, they're in, they're out. But that's a good answer.
Right. It's only that October, November where they're tight, and 2 of them, except for the election day, are giving a 3-day weekend. So that's at least not a middle of the week breakup. So I think that.
Right. Yeah, I'm just thinking about working parents sometimes.
Well, just I admire what you do, so don't take this the wrong way.
I know. We are always hesitant.
What if the October date were to move to September 14th? You got the same 3 tracks that are out. It's on a Monday, so the kids aren't coming in for one day.
2 3-day weekends in a row with Labor Day.
So I was going to say, so when I look, and that's something that is, I work at your pleasure. So September
I was just looking at the track breakup.
Yeah, September 14th is the next Monday when they've been out for Labor Day. Fine with me, but that's probably why I didn't look at it.
Okay.
But we certainly can. I mean,
No,
it's
I respect where
it's available on all 3 calendars. I think I probably didn't choose it because they had been out the week before.
But it'd be before track 2 came in. It'd extend their vacation 1 month.
I guess I did. Yeah, I didn't choose it because it was the Monday after Labor Day. They'd already been out this Monday, then they'd be out the next Monday of the next week.
Well, track 2 wouldn't.
Yeah, track 2 wouldn't be back.
Track 2 wouldn't have. Okay.
Well, I was looking at the other
But track 3 and 4 would have had the 2-3 days.
Okay. How it impacts modified and year-round, and traditional, because it's the day you went out for the whole. If you want that to be the district teacher.
No, I wasn't suggesting that.
Oh, you were just suggesting that it be.
Yeah, I was just looking at how to.
I'm sorry, I was looking at all 3.
How to have less holes in track 2.
Right. Okay.
But that's
the multi-track.
We'll leave that to you.
3 and 4 because 2 has already been out.
So
1 is going into their track out.
October. Did you say October 2nd?
Couldn't move October 2nd.
Consider moving the October 2nd to
September 14th.
The second Monday in September.
Okay.
Just as a possibility.
Sure. That one's easy.
The problem with that calendar is that we don't know what moving.
Yeah. So when I sit, I have to put on my glasses and shut my face.
Yeah. It's very interactive, interrelated.
Not unlike.
Yeah, it impacts the same tracks.
So we have one item that's been mentioned we're going to look at again for the tracks. Are there other considerations you want us to give? And how do you want us to proceed with May versus traditional and modified?
Having a work day that's consistent across the calendars makes sense if we're going to choose to have one in May.
From what I'm seeing, it looks to me like we're ready to move this.
So, do you want me to just work on this, October to September, and send that to Dr. Gardner, and he can share? You can just look at it and give me feedback, or do you want to bring that back to a work session?
That would be my question to the board. What's the pleasure? Do we want that back to the board? Do we want to say, if possible, do? Do we want to bring it back to an if-then choice?
See, I don't think I could put any input. I don't think I need to see it at a work session again. I just like to have them maybe ask the principals in a multi-track what would be better for track 2.
So I'll do that.
And whatever you come up with their input,
okay.
Fine.
So I'll make that change and send that back out to them. Okay.
And continue to go forward with the way the 3 calendars are drafted right now with the workday in May. We'll work with South East in particular about the options that you suggested. Also, we have your approval, knowing that we may have to incur some costs district-wide for whatever transportation we need for AP. That's yet to be determined for that, what that would look like.
For one school.
Well, I appreciate establishing yet kind of another principal idea, principles being a workday a month, and a principle being don't include all work days as makeup days. I think the more we can get to that kind of governing principle strategy, then we don't have one-off discussions as much, which I think is very effective. so those are all of the items that we have on in the work session agenda. We've got a half hour. We could eventually deal with some closed session issues.
Yeah, that would be such a great idea.
People would appreciate it.
Yes.
Chair. Go for it, Keith.
I move that we go into closed session to consider confidential personal information protected under GS 143-318.11A1, A3, and A6 and 115C-319 to consult with the Board of Education attorney and preserve the attorney-client privilege as provided in GS 143-318.11A3, and to consult with the Board of Education attorney and preserve the attorney-client privilege as provided in GS 143-318.11A3 due to current litigation EK by and through KK and JK versus Wake County Board of Education 18 EDC 6839 of the Office of Administrative Hearings.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. All right, we move into closed.